plus we talked about aerodynamics and smallness, and they're like, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe we could do that. We see if we can get the money. So I called up Cosworth, and what I said is, they said, well, how are you going to design this? I said, a BDG Cosworth is a 2-liter 4-cylinder. Half of that's a 1,000cc twin. The technology, you don't have to invent something from ground zero. When Harley was still small then, they were still recovering and starting to build themselves, so they didn't want to take on too huge of a project. So it's like, why don't you just, catch up, get a head start that way. And so I laid out the original VR motor in 1987. The concept, I didn't do any of the detailed drawings of the engine, but I laid out the concept of where the cylinder should go, that it should use Cosworth bore and stroke, BDG bore and stroke, and put the split line in, which is in the V-rod till today, a 13-degree split line on the crankcase, so that I could drop the crank, which was kind of narrowed down, lift up the clutch basket so it wouldn't drag on the ground, and get the output sprocket up so I could get better chassis geometry, better anti-squat geometry. And it centered the rear cylinder, because there's good things about V-twins, which is drivability and things. There's bad things about them, that the rear cylinder, the motor stretches out. Whether it's a 90-degree or 45, it's longer than an inline motor, narrower but longer, so it gets in the rider's way. So I set the cylinder and cam drive package, not the crank center line, not the rod center line, but the cylinder and cam package off the Cosworth in the center between the knees, so it could keep the bike as slim as possible. The other thing that wound up doing was saying, well, okay, how are you getting power out of this? How do the BDGs keep making more and more power? And the guys at Cosworth said, the biggest thing we're doing is airboxes. So that's the limitation. You need a huge airbox and you need ram air. And I asked them, I said, well, what do you need airbox size-wise? And they said, it's really based on the cylinder displacement rather than the whole engine displacement. It's taking one gulp at a time. And they said, here's the airbox volume you need for the cylinder. I'm like, okay, because I'm envisioning this engine, and it's a 60-degree V-twin. Okay, the airbox size is the size of a gas tank. Okay, I got a problem here. But I've been thinking about doing a Cobalt-style frame after doing the tube frames for the RRs. And for this bike, I knew how to get torsional rigidity out of it and get the handling really good. But I had a problem with bringing resonance in the chassis. And aluminum would damp that. Plus, the balance of getting torsional versus lateral flex would be easier to do with a beam-type frame. So I'm thinking about using the Cobalt-type frame anyhow. Those, you can look it up if you don't know what it is. Most of you probably do. But
JJ Cobalt.
And then I said, man, if I make it a little bigger, I can put the fuel in it. So right here, guys, is the original VR. This is 1989. That is the original motor. And if there's ever one to see a proof, take some pictures of that motor. You will never see another one of those. That's the original VR motor. If you'll notice on it, it's got a tie bar for a typical crazy Buell, link, using the engine as a stress member of the frame, and it was rubber mounted because I wanted to make it light and not tear it apart, because this first motor did not have any balancers in it. Okay, a 60-degree short stroke motor is much better than 45 for vibration, but it definitely has vibration. So that was the motor that was in it. That motor never ran more than a few minutes on a dyno. They were having problems with it, and they had to redesign it. But if you look at this, we put this together after Harley bought into Buell years later. So we were from a long story, but I'm okay. But anyhow, we wound up putting this in just to prove the concept when we started in the bike behind you, which I'll tell you more about. But if you look here, you can see the original mount. You can see the 4 bolt gears. You can see I welded on pieces here and added plates so I could, because the VR motor changed. But if you look at that motor, you will see 4 screw holes in there that match up with this. You get some interesting history that you would never find anywhere else. I hid this stuff away for a long time. I think you'd be intrigued by that. So if you see fuel in the frame, this is here. This is the fuel filler here. Wow. And the reason was the fairing, which there's almost nothing left of. There's a couple of pieces. There was a full fairing set and everything. All I've been able to find is that, which is actually one of the original fairings that was bonded and glued together, and the windshield was actually put back into it. If you turn it inside out, you'll see it was a functioning fairing. The windshield was glued back into it, bonded and primered, and then a mold was pulled back off that because the original molds were destroyed. So when we were trying to get this back up and running, unfortunately that's the original nose. But you can see the line I sketched on there. There we go. The windscreen, the clear bubble, was split, and this part flipped forward. And the reason for that was when I read my TC750 and had it, and the Superbike, when they were being filled, if you were filling, they had gone away from being able to dump the fuel through the side, you had a dual-tier dump can, and you get a lap full of fuel about a third of the way into the Daytona 200. It's a memorable experience for the rest of the race, as the skin comes off of your entire growing area. So I said, this is cool. Plus, you're holding the clutch in at that time. You had to keep the motor running. They wouldn't let you shut it off. You didn't have starters, right? You're holding the clutch in, kind of holding your face back like this while they're trying to dump the dump can in, right? Well, this you'd be able to just be sitting there, do it, pop, and the windshield goes. Yeah. And the other piece of this, as I thought about this, so this concept came from, how do I get an up-and gearbox? But then when you got down to it, you say, well, okay, that's the kind of frame I want anyhow, and the fuel load is strong. Because that was another thing I remembered from running the TZ750. When I ran in 78, I was a rookie expert. So I'd never ridden a TZ750 before, and never had any time to do much practicing. Bought the bike from Ron Mass, took it to there with a couple of buddies of mine. We had the refueling rig. Well, I went out and was running the race, qualified fastest rookie ahead of Momola. It's a big deal for me. It was a private bike. But I was running in the top 10. I was running, Jerry Scott and I were battling, and he wound up 9th, I think, and I broke 2/3 of the way, 3/4 of the way into it. But anyhow, I was running up there, over my head, riding really, really hard, riding it like it was a sprint race. I'd never run a 200-miler before. But you come in about 75 miles into the race, and you have been on the gas, both tires sliding on your knee, just hard enough. Come into the pit, sitting there, you don't do tire changes, 6 seconds, 4 seconds. I mean, incredibly quick to refuel, because you can use a tower then and a 3-inch top hose. You can see the fitting for the fuel fill in the side of the RW. Yeah. That's the side, that's where we refueled it. It was fast. So you're just sitting there, and then they slap you on your back. Oh, Jesus! What happened to my bike? 46 gallons at 7 pounds a gallon? Here, you would just slowly earn your way down to here. When we came off the track, it was light and nimble, and all of a sudden it was a pig. So I thought, man, I'm winning every way. I got the frame that I want, I got airbox, and I got the fuel box. You didn't see it till the XB. That's the long story. But this is what it was. This is how long ago that was. You also see split radiators to get the motor fluid.
What year was this, sir?
89. Wow. 20 years ago. Is that right? Little side of fuel that you didn't know about. So that was the first run at this thing. And like I said, it kind of got written off the books and disappeared. And a new engine was done, and they did work with Spawn to do a frame, and that didn't work, and they wound up coming back and doing a beam type frame. Kind of similar to this, a little longer. The issue they had with it was earbox, and that was always the problem with it. There were two problems that the VR race bike had. One is that the rider was a good stable bike, but because it was a little long, but the rider was too far back from the handlebars, which caused them issues unless the rider was really willing to put his life on the line. And they could never make the power out of it because they only had an earbox this big. Half of it was fuel tank, which pushed the rider back and compromised the airbox. I don't know what to say, man, but I had the answer. It took me a lot of years to prove it. Next run was, so Harley Davidson was involved started we started the S2s. They bought into the company in 93, started it over. We built some more two-frame bikes, the S2 and then the S1. And I think in actually it was early as 94. No, it must have been, it was 95. A woman named Ann Tynan was the head of their vice president of marketing at that time. And she was kind of independent, not old school, being from the outside. And she went out and did a bunch of research on the sport bike market around Buell and said the air-cooled sport bike market is limited. The majority of the sport bike market is water-cooled. It's not something that most of us as sport bike riders didn't know, but it was a good message from a high-up person, in Harley. So they had all this research, and they said, okay, I think you need a water-cooled bike. I said, oh yeah, baby. I can think of what I can do. I know exactly what I need. The street version of that. So at that time, Jeff Bluestein had a relationship with Porsche through the consulting work they had done for them and the V4 Nova project.